Today we are going to be talking about King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, Snatched, and The Wall. So stay tuned.
Welcome to The Real Review.
Welcome to The Real Review, sponsored by Parametric and Lazy Ape Studios, where you get some of the latest happenings, real thoughts, and perspectives in the world of film and television. And with me today, I have John Cena Cunningham.
I like it. That's I wish I were even half of what John Cena is physically. I'm not that much of a physical brute, I guess.
Dude, you're like 6'7". You weigh like 250 pounds. You're kind of like...
I don't want to go into detail on this, but I got weighed the other day for like the first time in a really long while, and I was like, I'll be good. I was like 20 pounds more than I expected.
Well, it's because you got real buff, huh?
I did get really buff, yeah. I think it's,
probably why.
As I'm getting older, I'm getting more buff. That's what happens, right?
Buffness comes with age.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
It's definitely not fat. It's buffness. Yeah.
Buffness.
Yeah, so, I am here with Matt Laughs at the Name Baghdadi. Hey. That's my nickname for you today. People aren't going to necessarily catch that reference because it's from an upcoming show.
It's an upcoming TV show.
Yeah, we were watching the trailers for some of the upcoming lineup.
It's called The Brave.
And that one's called The Brave, yeah, and they named the guy. It's like Batty McBaghdaddy.
It's really bad, too. They named the bad guy from the Middle East, last name or first name, Baghdadi.
I don't know if they did that. Maybe that is a common name over there, but I don't know. It just sounded like it's the really bad. It's like Bad McBadster.
Yeah, I don't think it works very well.
John McTerrorist. That's his name. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of funny.
There you go.
But and we'll talk about John Cena here in a little bit. But before we get there, if you've never had a chance to listen to our show, we are The Real Review, where it's kind of the convergence or the collision, if you will, of two perspectives. You have the fan perspective when it comes to film, which is more like what I am, a little bit more emotionally driven, more like, hey, is this going to be fun? How is this, is it? And those things combined, as it outweigh, for me, it outweighs a lot of like little critical things and stuff like that. Then you have your side, which is more of the critical side, the more of the critic side, which is more critical, maybe a little bit more negative and nitpicky at times.
Yeah, it's like the emotion and the technical sides of things, but we both have a technical and emotional sides to our reviews.
Yes, you just lean more one way, and I lean more the other way.
I lean more right.
Yeah,
and you lean more like backwards.
Back, south, east. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. There you go.
Anyway, that's kind of how that works. But Joel, why don't you tell our listeners how to get connected with us?
For sure. So we have a couple different ways you can get connected to the podcast. Obviously, we have a website you guys can check out, which is realreviewmedia.com. We're always posting a lot of really cool content on there. And then additionally, we have all of these social networks that are popular and are in existence right now that most of you are probably a part of. We have our Facebook page, we have our Instagram page, we have our Twitter. All those can be found at Real Review Media, which is the at Real Review Media. Specifically, Facebook is facebook.com/Real Review Media. Twitter and Instagram is at Real Review Media. And so we're always posting a lot of really fun stuff up on there. So
it's good. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll probably have a lot of good things to be posting in the next couple days as they're announcing all the different releases of the shows that are coming out for the different lineups for 2017, 2018, right, Matt?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Exciting times to see what chances TV networks are going to take on things
or not take.
You're like
getting canceled. So,
or they're like, let's renew CSI for a 30-second season.
Yeah,
and you're like, we're not taking any chances. They're just going to renew that.
Yeah, I should give that show a shot, but I just no interest.
I watched it when it originally came out back in like 1992.
Were you like 12?
Wasn't that?
Yeah.
No. It was late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so let's dive right into this because I have a lot of opinions about this first one, and we're actually going to go ahead and talk about King Arthur, Legend of the Sword.
Awesome.
Now, I had a chance to see this, and you did not, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar, this is kind of the general synopsis. It is robbed of his birthright. Arthur comes up the hard way in the back alleys of the city, but once he pulls the sword from the stone, he is forced to acknowledge his true legacy, whether he likes it or not. And this is directed by Guy Ritchie. He also helped do the screenplay, but then you also have Charlie Hunnam, Astrid Burgess Frisbee, Jude Law and Jimon Hansu. Sorry, man. Eric Bana and Freddie Fox, Aidan Gillen, and Craig McGinley, and lots of other people.
Yeah, it's some good talent.
There is actually some really good talent. And let me say this. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's floating around to 27%.
Wow. That's
abysmal.
That is really bad even for Rotten Tomatoes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really bad. And it makes me feel sad because this movie is a lot better than that.
Really?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us, I guess then if you want, a bit about like why do you think, maybe talk about the good and the bad, but also mention why you maybe think that they're giving it such horrible rating?
Yeah.
If you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I could go that route. I think the thing to take away from this movie is it's first of all, you got to go into it realizing it's a Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, he
has a very specific style. Very specific style. He never really deviates from that. He's kind of got that little, like, you can tell it's a Guy Ritchie movie, and it comes from like the quick-witted dialogue and the banter and the humor that ensues from the dialogue and how the storytelling happens in a non-linear format during that banter and dialogue. And it works so well in this movie. This movie I was actually having a really good time with. It's fun, exciting. It's visually, it's actually not that bad. I was expecting most of the CG to be really terrible, but it wasn't. Yeah. It was a little bit in a couple of scenes, but for the most part, I thought it was really well. Charlie Hunnam was the best that I had seen him in since Sons of Anarchy. I mean, I haven't seen him in a movie that I've been really, really impressed with, but I thought he was really, really good as a Guy Ritchie King Arthur. Okay. As far as the story is concerned, it maybe fell flat a little bit, but I bought into it for what it was. There are some really cool elements, and I think the Guy Ritchie-isms are probably one of the biggest highlights of this film. There's a scene specifically at the beginning that reminds me of like Lock, Stock, or like Snatched from way back, and it's like this banter, and you're like there's moments where you're barely keeping up with the editing. Yeah,
you can understand sometimes just what they're implying less than you actually understand what it is they're doing or saying, because it's just so quick and witty back and forth. Yeah.
But then they give you a second to catch up, and then you laugh, and then to go back into it again. And those little moments are really, really good. And I was really, really impressed with it. Also, they spent a lot of time, and this is kind of a good and a bad for me. Mm-hmm. They spent a lot of time, obviously it's called King Arthur Legend of the Sword. Yeah. They spent a lot of time with the sword and like how powerful it is. Right. And I didn't know this, but there's like, and I think it kind of creates its own mythology. Like it was, Excalibur was forged from like a part of Merlin's like staff.
I didn't know that.
And that's why, I don't know if that's like true to the legend though. So I think it could have been a Guy Ritchie-ism that they just
It might have been. I've never heard of that.
So I was like, that's kind of cool.
Not super familiar with the Arthurian legend.
Right. And a lot of it reminded me of Lord of the Rings. So on the positive side of the sword, it made the sword super powerful, but only this bloodline could use it. And that's why Arthur and his father could use it.
I gotcha.
And so whenever he like embraces a sword, and Charlie Hunnam takes the sword and like grabs it with two hands and essentially like activates it, there's like this sound that happens that sounds like a blacksmith like hammering a sword, and it's like and it actually sounds kind of cool in the way that works.
I think what you're saying you'd have to see it. It sounds kind of silly to me, but I think if I saw it, maybe it would come across a little better than what you're explaining it.
Right. So here's
it's like a lightsaber turning on. It's like wow, you know what I mean? Like that's.
But here's the thing: it makes sense because it reminds me of this game called Shadow of Mordor, which is a Lord of the Rings game. Yeah. And whenever you you've charged up enough power and you can use the special abilities with your sword, it makes that noise.
Why would it make that noise? Why wouldn't it make like a or like some other random?
Okay, listen. I would not be intimidated if somebody was holding a sword and he activated it and it goes.
It's like a bird chirping or like a baby crying. Dog goes,
or Wilhelm scream.
Exactly.
And anyway, so the way that happens, it's done really, it's really cool in the movie, but like it's super powerful. Like he's not only, it almost is if he kind of like becomes a Flash where he's super fast and everything is in slow motion. Okay. And you see these scenes happening, and those are pretty sweet. So
like
scenes.
Focuses his attention to the point where everything seems like it slows down.
Right.
Something like
but
that. But
it's also super powerful where he's swinging and then like dudes 20 feet away just like explode.
Oh, so it's like Sauron.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
scene. Yeah.
A lot of it is very reminiscent of Lord of the Rings, and
Yeah.
I think that works. I thought it was really cool. The only problem with it is, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the Guy Ritchie isms. He's not always super linear in his storytelling. He wants to make a point in telling, the legend of the sword as the movie progresses, as opposed to getting the legend of it up front. And I feel like, because the beginning where he pulls the sword out of the stone is almost meaningless and weightless. It didn't feel like this is an epic moment.
Yeah, you expect it's going to happen, it just happens.
Right.
Kind of
and there wasn't any build up to it.
Right.
But it wasn't until like towards the end of the movie where you get like all these flashbacks and things that you're like, wow, this is really a big deal.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be like, I wanted the moment when I was watching the trailers, I wanted the moment where he's pulling the sword out of the stone for it to be like, oh man, this is a crazy moment,
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And I was like, oh, but
does it make a sound when he pulls it out? Does it make like a
it makes a Joel
an activation
sound. It goes John Cena.
Da, da.
Yeah. Anyways, but other than that, Jude Law's in it.
Yeah.
He's really good. It's not like this. He's a bad guy, and he's not overplaying it too. You can tell that he's having a good time doing it, and it was just very good, believable as this like evil guy.
Yeah.
And there are some really cool CG elements with some creatures in it at some other points.
Yeah.
But other than that, the story wasn't as deep. It felt a little long too towards the end.
Okay.
And I was kind of like, I went with my dad, and we left. The first thing he said, it was kind of long. I was like, yeah, it was a little bit long.
Yeah.
But I thought it was kind of just a fun movie. Nothing deep, but it was enjoyable.
So that would be one aspect that maybe some reasons for why it's not. I don't know. The marketing wise, it felt very much like they were trying to go with this epic, almost emotional type feel.
Maybe
that it didn't feel very fun.
Okay.
I don't know. At least in my opinion, the trailer came across as a lot more epic.
So maybe critics kind of felt like they were lied to in the trailers a little bit.
It's possible. I would like to think that critics would go into something a little bit more unbiased, but
right.
I don't know. So what would you say in regard to that in particular? Do you have any thoughts as why maybe a critic would go in and say this was just a bad movie? Is it a style thing? Because there is generally a level to which most action movies in Hollywood and critics will just kind of always default that to like a B, C ranking. You know what I mean? Like it's very hard for an action movie in and of itself to become a higher echelon critic approved favorite type film.
Right. I think the biggest thing is there's King Arthur, that whole legend is just not a draw. I think there's not a draw. I think people don't really care about it.
Yeah,
I wasn't looking forward to that really ever.
Yeah.
I just kind of decided to go see it. And I think the other thing is that I think Guy Ritchie's style is polarizing. Like there's not like a lot of middle ground. I think people like it or hate it.
Yeah.
And I think a combination of a King Arthur story that's directed by Guy Ritchie is just going to split a lot of people, and it just happened to split a lot more one way than the other.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not a great movie. I won't say that, but it was decent. And I feel kind of bad because I feel like it's gonna dampen the reputation of maybe Charlie Hunnam, or maybe even though I thought he did great in the movie, or Guy Ritchie for that matter. I thought it was a decent movie. Not near. It's 26%. I said 27 earlier, but it could have been. It's not. If I had to personally rank it, I'd give it a 70. Okay. I think it's way off.
Wow, that is a lot different. Yeah, compared to what they're getting on the ratings wise. How would you say? Here's the thing about Guy Ritchie is most of his films are very real. They tend to be very like, although the dialogue and the back and the forth, there's a very witty, quick, fast-paced style to it. He doesn't incorporate and include things like magic and legends and otherworldliness type ideas into his films.
Yeah.
As far as I know, this is the first that he's done something like that.
This is his first kind of dive into that. I'd say the closest he got was maybe Sherlock, but that's not even like the same thing.
Yeah. So how do you feel like he did with adding those elements? Do you feel like he handled that well? It was realistic. It wasn't silly.
Well, it's a fantasy film, so it's not. when you talk about it being realistic, I'm kind of like, I don't know, but
realistic in the film's narrative,
Right.
the verisimilitude aspect.
it did.
Yeah.
It fit the
Okay.
story well. I thought it was awesome, like in the way whoever was holding Excalibur defeated the person that was fighting with magic.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. It felt very satisfying, the action stuff.
Yeah.
And it felt like, yeah, all right. I was kind of like, you get him with that magic sword.
Yeah.
But yeah, it fit well. I think it's just a style thing. I think people have a hard time with this style. The fantasy element, I liked it way better than Warcraft, as far as a fantasy film is concerned.
See, I didn't see Warcraft, but I heard a lot of bad things about it. So
yeah. So I don't know. That's my review. I give it a 70. It was good. Or I should say it was all right, maybe a little better than all right.
Yeah.
And I feel bad. It made $14 million this weekend, which is nothing. It had a $175 million production budget, and it's probably one of the, other than monster trucks, one of the first certified bombs.
Yeah, that's intense. Wow, that's going to be a pretty nasty bump for them to move over.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I'm sure it'll probably do a lot better in the home movie market. This seems like the kind of film that a lot of people would rent to watch over a weekend or something like that.
It's possible.
But either way, that's still pretty intense.
Yep.
It's a pretty big loss.
Well, that is it for the review of King Arthur. Now, Joel, you got to see a movie that I did not get to see. And I'm sure you're extremely prideful because you got to see it and I didn't, and I'm probably very envious, correct?
Yeah, you should be super envious of this, Matt. I think.
What's the movie that you saw, Joel?
We're talking about a little film called Snatched. It's not a great film, but we'll talk about it. Let me talk a little bit about it. There was some not so great stuff. So this is a comedy. The synopsis for this is: when her boyfriend dumps her before their exotic vacation, a young woman persuades her ultra-cautious mother to travel with her to paradise with unexpected results. It was directed by Jonathan Levine. It was written by Katie Dippold. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her last name there, but it also stars primarily, I'm going to just say, Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn.
Sure.
There was a pretty large, secondary cast of people that kind of showed up at different times. The two most prominent side characters was probably Wanda Sykes and Joan Cusack. That they both played a pretty funny kind of, I don't know, how do you explain it? Side adventuresome characters.
Characters.
Yeah, and then her son as well, Goldie Hawn's son and Amy Schumer's brother, is played by Ike Barinholtz. He plays a guy named Jeffrey. And so in talking about this film, here's what I'd say. I think that as far as R-rated comedies go that I've seen this year, this definitely wasn't the worst one that I've seen.
Okay, awards for not being the worst one.
It wasn't also a bad, horrible, awful film. I'm not going to say this is one of the worst films of the year or anything like that. I think really it just didn't tonally. So maybe I should start with some of the good stuff.
Yeah. Give us some of the good.
Yeah, some of the good stuff. I think in a way there was some kind of, it was intriguing, the idea of it. The presentation of the idea of these two ladies that are both kind of very, city folk type ladies, very not used to going to a world like this in South America, and kind of fish out of water story. That element I did like.
So I had your interest to some degree. Okay.
To some degree, the interest of that fish out of water story kind of did have my interest. And I think as well, the relationship between Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn at times was very, I don't know how to explain it. It was fitting. It made sense. It felt like an honest relationship between a mom and a daughter, that would exist in the real world.
Oh, cool.
So I think they did a good job catching that dynamic of the relationship. Outside of that, though, there wasn't a lot to grasp onto with this story. I think the other thing I would say about this film is that if you are a mom and a daughter or something, I think there's going to be more elements in this film that you would connect to.
Okay.
I don't think I'm the target audience for this kind of film.
Okay.
There is a semblance of the mother-daughter aspect that kind of does play out in the film. And not just because it's Mother's Day. That is there. I don't think they did it just because of Mother's Day. It added to the film in a good way. It created a little bit of an arc in the relationship between Amy Schumer and her mom. very, 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 very minor ones.
Okay.
So it was like, they went from A to B. It wasn't like they went A all the way to F. It's like, so they were this or they were that. And I'd say in a lot of ways that's kind of where the good parts end. The very beginning of the film, and they've been doing this more often now because I think a lot of theaters, it's just they're not doing as well right now, but they put those little previews before the movie. So instead of like the don't copy, don't download illegally, they have like their stars from the film say like, hey, thanks for watching this in theaters. It's going to be great. You know what I mean? Thanks. Yeah. So I've seen twice now.
Oh, weird.
The movie that we're talking about after this, which I saw as well, did it. And then this film, Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn were both there talking, saying like, hey, thanks for watching this in the theater. It was really fun. Thanks for joining us and supporting, the industry. And so they had like 2 jokes in that opening scene, and I didn't laugh at either of them. And I was like, this is a bad start.
This is a bad sign.
It's like, I'm like, this is a bad sign of things to come. And one of them was like a really gross sexual joke with Amy Schumer. And I was expecting that because it's kind of Amy Schumer style. She makes like really over the top, like sexual kind of jokes. And I think we talked about this in the prior podcast when we talked about in the coming soon, which Amy Schumer to me can do a decent job acting. She's believable in the roles that she's taken. I actually liked her personally in Trainwreck. I thought she did a good job. I didn't like the film, but I thought she did a good job with it. And maybe that is kind of maybe a little bit of a strength to this film. It's not doing like horribly awful right now. It's not getting like the most amazing ratings. 36% Rotten Tomato meter, 34% of viewers. Which is interesting to me because I felt like it was bad, but it wasn't like I said, it wasn't like the worst movie I've seen all year bad. You know,
you're thinking maybe 40s, 50s.
Yeah,
like a critic
and we'll get to like my rating on it, but more middle range bad than like awful bad. Yeah. So
dip it down into King Arthur territory.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on? So. I don't want to talk about necessarily too much of like the actual plot elements because there's really not a lot there, to be honest. I mean, they go to South America. Everything is like flagged. You know exactly where, and that's one of the main problems I think that I will get into with the humor style. We talked about this in Coming Soon as well, with the humor, and it was very evident in the trailer that they were going for this kind of like shock humor style, and not even necessarily like shocking as in like, I can't believe you would say something like that. That's so disgusting. More of like, they try to put your expectations here that they're going to go this way, and then they go there. Like the person's like, no, there's no way I'll ever go. And then somebody's like, you should go. And then they're like, okay, I'll go. Like that's the joke.
Really?
And they did like, there wasn't even like an exact scene like that where like Amy Schumer, I think the one scene that kind of made me laugh a little bit more than others was when her boyfriend breaks up with her. Okay. That's kind of like the funniest part in a way because it's kind of sad and depressing, but it's very like real in a way, not like real, but it felt very funny the way that the whole thing was handled because she's expecting one thing, and that was kind of the first part that I kind of laughed a little bit at. But to go back to what I was talking about, so Amy's kind of or Emily, who's Amy Schumer in this, Schumer's character's name, Emily, trying to convince her mother, Linda, to take this trip with her because it's a non-refundable trip that she purchased for her boyfriend who dumped her because his band is becoming super successful and he feels like, Amy Schumer's not going anywhere. She's just living this very bland life. She gets fired at the beginning. And so she's kind of going this trip as like a screw you to her boyfriend, but also as like, I'm going to make use of this and have fun and just be that person that just goes out there and does stuff. And her mom is like this worrier and stuff. And so like, she's going to go, but like, Emily's trying to convince her mom. She's like, you should go with me. I bought this non-refundable ticket and let's do this and let's go. And it's like, it's build up. And then she goes, well, no. And then you're like, oh, because you were expecting her to say yes there, and then finally she does say yes and goes with her. But it's all humor that kind of like falls in that same line. There was a couple moments that were just a little bit ridiculous to me that they were kind of trying to, I think, sell a little too hard. There was a scene with like a tapeworm that I don't really want to talk about too much. It's really, really disgusting.
That stuff freaks me out.
That's like one of my pet peeves. We've talked about that. Like, I don't like the idea of like living things being in like inside my body or something.
like life.
Yeah, like life. Yeah. I don't know. The relationship, I'll talk about this, between some of the characters was a bit off at times and a bit weird. I didn't like her brother. I felt like her relationship that Goldie Hawn and her brother had together was at times really scary and kind of off-putting.
Really?
Yeah, he almost came across like he was like in love with his mom, which was like a little too much for me. Yeah. Like you can go to the point of making him a mama's boy. That's fine, but like don't like literally almost have him like be in love with his mom.
Right.
There was the other thing was like everybody in this story, this chain of events, came across as being very inept in a way, and I think the funniest interactions that I saw the entire time. So like Jeffrey and Goldie Hawn and Amy Schumer. So Jeffrey is Ike. They're all trying. They're all trying to get the federal government to actually come down there and like rescue them after they've been taken hostage. And that situation was actually kind of funny. The way that they got taken hostage was actually kind of realistic, and there was kind of some funny stuff there when they first get away. But it was very funny, but also very unrealistic as far as the way that the State Department kind of treated them throughout that process. Like, these are women that have been kidnapped by people in a third world country and are being ransomed, and their solution is like, well, whenever we find them. When they get in contact with us, they'll get in contact with us. So it's kind of funny in a way, because they're like the red tape and the how that would kind of play out. The thing that I didn't like is it felt like everybody in the movie was completely inept except for Goldie Hawn and Amy Schumer's character. It felt like everybody in the entire movie were just complete morons, and they would all do like these. Like, I needed somebody to be. I would rather have had Goldie Hawn and Amy Schumer's characters be the idiots in a way, if that makes sense, where they are kind of like constantly having these stupid things befall them because they are the dumb people.
Right.
Whereas it was like they were just innocent bystanders that were doing all these okay things. They needed to work on their relationship, but all these bad things keep happening to them because everybody around them is horrible people and stupid people and inept and everything like that. And that's not that funny because you're just getting little snippets of each character. Like every once in a while, somebody will hop in, then they'll do something stupid and then they're gone.
Right.
And so you're not connecting to anybody long enough to really build up a sense of like why that would be funny, that they're just stupid.
Yeah.
So that really didn't leave much to me. I do like Joan Cusack. I think she's hilarious at times.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I love about her that is like the funniest thing is the way that she talks, the way that she interacts with
I just think
characters.
of Jessie from Toy Story.
Yeah. Well, it's so like a really funny movie that I'm a big fan of is Grosse Pointe Blank.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. She's in that movie. And she is so hilarious in that movie because she plays this kind of like receptionist lady that also is like really intense at times. And she's like, there's just like a couple scenes in the movie and it's all about her dialogue and the way that she says things. And in this movie, they literally tell you that she's a special ops person that cut out her own tongue.
Oh my god!
And so she has no dialogue in the entire movie.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, that's one of my favorite things about Joan Cusack. It's her hilarious dialogue. And so Wanda Sykes plays kind of like her assistant in a way, like they're buddies, and they're kind of on this trip. And she was special ops, and they go on these like crazy trips together. And their relationship was kind of funny. But it like removed any semblance of like me getting the good things out of the characters that I would have liked. I'm trying to think about some other. The story arc was just really flat. You kind of knew exactly where it was going to go from the beginning to the end. The very ending, again, I'm not going to spoil anything, not that it necessarily matters, but was really, really obvious. It was like, and not only was it obvious, but it felt, not that it needs to be unmanipulated, but it felt super manipulated. It's like all these sets of circumstances just happen to like line up and I'm talking about the very, very ending, like when they're finally like capturing Goldie, like getting Goldie Hawn out and everything like that. It was like literally like, oh, that just happened that way, and that just happened that way, and that just happened to go that way, and it just literally felt like, okay, well, we need to wrap things up, so we're gonna just have everything serendipitously just happen in an exact certain way.
Guys, we're running out of money and time here.
That's what it literally felt like. It literally felt like it. Well, we're out of time. We're out of money. So how we need to wrap this up, let's just have everything go a certain way.
All right, cool.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like the big bad guy shows up at just the exact moment. They decide that it's just really silly and kind of over the top. I think they were going for kind of making that a joke in a way that it's like, it kind of turned out serendipitously almost as like, oh, that's ridiculous how everything just worked out that way. But it felt stupid. It felt manipulated. So I don't know. What would I say about this movie more? I really don't honestly know.
Okay.
Laughed.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How was the counting down from 100 scene? Because the only thing kind of giggled at in the trailer.
Yeah, that was the problem. Is I'd seen it, and I kind of knew it was coming, so it wasn't that funny. I think it would have been funnier if they had actually done something like, all right, we're gonna count down from 100, and then she shot him.
Yeah.
Like, because then it would have been like, oh, you saw that in the trailer, but it actually turns out that she shot the guy. But like, That's right. I don't know if
In the trailer, I thought she was gonna like accidentally pull the trigger,
right?
And like,
yeah,
like, no, I didn't mean to.
No, but that's like the point. It's like this big bad guy in a way has been built up as this like really big bad guy, and then he just completely becomes entirely inept at that point. Like literally becomes like the most inept.
Forgets his
idiot.
bad guy skills.
Yeah, he's like, oh, don't kill me, don't shoot me, and then they're like literally handing the gun back and forth to each other. And like, there's like 5 or 6 moments where he could have just gotten up and run off. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
Just stupid things like that.
Yeah.
So they needed it to go a certain way. You know what I mean? So again, I didn't think it was that great and that connectable. I texted you after seeing it and I said, there's some movies where you see the trailer and unfortunately the funniest parts are in the trailer. And then I said to you, I think the unfortunate thing is the funniest movies about this movie weren't even in the movie because it just like wasn't funny parts. Right. There was one part that I kind of chuckled at, and it has to do with this situation where they meet this guy, and that he's going to guide them through the jungle to like get back to the State Department. And you can tell that this guy's like kind of like a bit of a doofus kind of dude, and the truth finally gets revealed, and that's kind of funny. And then he does something right before his character literally is like and gone from the film. And that scene in and of itself was kind of funny. Yeah. But it was was just like a little bit of a chuckle.
Yeah. It's not
and then
like
it's kind of like
gut laugh.
It's not like a gut laugh.
Still the best comedy of the year, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I laughed 5 times harder at Guardians of the Galaxy than I laughed at anything in this entire movie. And it wasn't even like, you could make the excuse that maybe it was like Amy Schumer humor, which sounds rhyming, but it wasn't even her. Like, she had a couple moments where she got crude and like, hey, if you want to see Amy Schumer's breast, go watch this movie because that happens.
Schumer humor.
Yeah, but like even that was like, they were framing it like the guy's talking to her. He's like, oh, by the way, your breast is hanging out. And they're like framing her face. And you're like, okay, they're going to roll the camera down and like there's going to be her boob. And sure enough, they do that.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like everything is flagged and like staged and that this is going to go exactly where it goes. So it wasn't shocking. It wasn't hilarious. It wasn't unexpected. It wasn't anything. It kind of like on a scale, all aspects on a scale of 1 to 10 hit like a 4. So
what would
humor, acting, style, cinematography, plot, everything just on a 4.
So is that, would you rate it 40?
Yeah. So I put it about like I don't know if I can give like an exact number, between 40 and 50.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely a fail, but it's not like worst movie ever fail.
I gotcha.
So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, we talked about it before. I didn't really see a lot of hope for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, good to know. Good to know.
I think what might have helped this movie is if they had cut back on a couple of the characters, they had turned it into a PG-13 movie, and they had made the humor more I don't know how to explain it exactly, but less of the stage dialogic, like back and forth type humor and more situational humor. There wasn't any like funny scenes.
Okay.
There was like 2 scenes, the 2 or 3 scenes that actually were really funny were like the setups of the different scenarios in the scenes, but none of the dialogue. Like none of the dialogue I laughed at.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there you go.
Good to know. Well, that is our review, or Joel's review, I should say, of Snatched. I'm glad you were so fortunate enough to witness that.
Yes.
But so this next film that we're going to talk about, and I'm actually really glad you got a chance to see this, Joel, because this is one that flew under the radar for me that I didn't realize till after we had talked about what was upcoming that was coming out this weekend, and it's called The Wall, right?
Yep.
So I was actually kind of intrigued by this, and it actually looked good to me. It looked like I'm a fan of those like self-contained movies where they take place in one-ish location for a long time.
Yeah.
I like the suspense and if you can keep me on the edge of my seat during a film while you're just at one location, then that's awesome. I'm super pumped. 10 Cloverfield Lane is a great example of that. And the Wall came out, and honestly, it's getting, I just want to double check and make sure we're good. It's getting way better reviews. It's like what, 68% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, a little bit lower for audience scores at 58.
Right. So critically, it's getting a little bit better reviews. Actually, a lot better if you want to take into consideration Snatched and King Arthur. It's doubling their scores or tripling them in some instances.
Yeah.
But I was excited to see this. I still kind of want to see it, but I mean, what
I'm going to do my best to not spoil anything for you as well.
Okay. And this is short too, isn't it? Like a short runtime?
An hour and 21 minutes, I think. So it was really short.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if I was like, I want to go see another movie before we do the podcast.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I had time for.
Yeah.
And I checked this one out and I was like, whoa, that's short.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
go to that one. Yeah. So it fit perfectly. So this film, I will say, did the synopsis. It's two American soldiers are trapped by a lethal sniper with only an unsteady wall between them. It's directed by Doug Liman. It stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, John Cena,
exactly,
and Laith Knockley. Although Laith, I don't know if that's how I pronounced either of his names, unfortunately, but he's just pretty much a voice. You don't even see him. So
gotcha.
He plays the sniper that's on the Afghani side and. Sorry, the Iraqi side, not Afghani. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's from our conversation.
Baghdadi?
Baghdadi, yeah. But yeah, so he plays the Iraqi side. And so I literally just saw this movie, and we've talked about this before. I really don't like to just like go see a movie and then talk about it because I really, it's still difficult for me to process some elements of it and put those into like specific words and as well as like looking up different aspects of the production. So I haven't had a chance to do that too much yet. So I will say these are my tentative thoughts. Maybe we'll talk about it later after you get a chance to see it.
Sure.
And we can talk a bit more in detail. I thought this movie was interesting. So it takes place during the Iraqi war, during the Bush, I think it's 2007 is the setup for everything. And it's like at the end of the war, sort of, and there's still forces on the ground that are there. I don't think we got all of our forces out there until when after Obama had gotten elected, he pulled a lot more of the troops out of there. So, but the war has kind of ended in a lot of ways, and that's kind of a big part of the story here. They're talking about this. And so I don't want to. It's difficult because there's not a lot that happens. Because again, they're pinned down. They're pinned down. Right. One character in particular, Aaron Taylor Johnson. So I don't want to talk again about spoilers. But John Cena is rendered. I'm not going to say if he's dead or alive or what. But
even in the trailers, it looks like he's alive on the ground. He's trying to get to him.
He's rendered incapacitated is what I will say. I'm not going to say how or why, but he's rendered incapacitated. And then on the basis of that, it's most of the acting, most of the dialogue takes place from Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah.
And I would say that Aaron Taylor, I like him. I think he's really good. He was in
Nocturnal Animals.
Yeah. I thought he was really good in that. And we talked about this before. He's gotten kind of a bad rap because of the Godzilla franchise. Well, it's becoming a franchise, but because of the first movie, he was kind of flat, a lot of people thought, and he's kind of wooden. He's not flat at all in this movie. And he wasn't flat at all in Nocturnal Animals. I thought he played a great character in that movie. I thought he deserved a nomination, if nothing else, for that role. So in this movie, he's not flat at all either. He's very believable and realistic. And I think the huge thing with a movie like this, because it takes place in one primary location, is the dialogue and the characterization. You have to have strong dialogue and strong characterization, which is important to almost any film, but it is even more important for this kind of film because it's all about the dialogue and the conversation.
Right.
And there was good dialogue. And I think that's one of the things that is making this movie as good as it is and getting as good a ratings as it is, because there is realistic dialogue, there is really realistic relatability and conversation that happens because he's talking with this other sniper, that's an Iraqi, and there's good back and forth that's kind of happening there. And John Cena himself is also decent. He's not amazing, but he's good in the role, and he's believable as the character, and everything that he does is pretty solid. It felt like it felt very believable and understandable. So some things that I kind of had some minor gripes and some issues with is that although it was very believable in regard to how this would probably play out for somebody that was under that set of circumstances, there was definitely some manipulation in regard to specifically the Iraqi sniper, his role in the film and the dialogue. So I feel like this is the kind of film where it didn't really have a strong message in a sense. Like it had a strong message, but it becomes a bit muddled because they're trying to make it about the war.
They didn't execute it well in making it.
Yeah, they're setting things up specifically with the Iraqi sniper in a somewhat unrealistic fashion. They're almost giving this guy, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but they're giving him almost this like godlike ability to kind of just know what to do and know how to do it, know
Right.
when to do it, know where to do it. And not only that, but his skills and his abilities are almost otherworldly. And I was looking at that as almost maybe that was like a message, because this is the kind of film where, because it takes place in one place, because they've only got one thing going on, it very much can give you a strong message.
Right.
Because it's like, well, we don't have anything else going on, so we really have to tell you a story. There's very little character arc and character development throughout the course of the film. Like Aaron Taylor Johnson has a bit. He kind of goes through a character arc, but his character arc is more of circumstances, less than actually him moving forward. And so it comes
Right.
across as a film that has a very strong, like, intended potential message that they could be sharing that specifically has to do with like the Iraq War
Gotcha.
and the occupation and what that meant. But it felt unrealistic to me because it felt like the Iraqi was not at all relatable.
Okay.
And so I was kind of wondering, and this is where I like to spend more time thinking about films so I can think about this type of stuff. But
Well, we can revisit it.
right, I was almost wondering if they were in a way trying to make the Iraqi like symbolic in a way, like maybe they were trying to go for like a Hotels California type thing,
Okay.
because they talk a lot about like why they haven't left and why he's still there in the war. You don't really get an answer to that, but I felt like maybe they were trying to have the Iraqi specifically say certain things at certain times to give you an impression of what the message was
Okay.
for the overall story. But I didn't take out of it a strong sense of what that message would be, other than war is kind of bad,
Yeah,
and bad
yeah,
things
yeah.
happen because of war. And that's such a simple message, which can be effective if done in the right way. But with this limited circumstance of just like kind of three people interacting with each other, it just didn't come across very strongly.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It felt almost like they were just stuck in this circumstance. He was trying to get out of it, and that guy is just sitting there kind of trying to talk about really deep things when you're more concerned. Because the other side of this, which I had maybe a little uncomfortable, is that in order to like get the message of it, in order to get the message out of it, you would kind of have to side with the Iraqi.
Really?
And the
Okay.
Iraqi is killing American troops and has killed a bunch of other American troops.
Right.
And so in order to get, I felt like the message that you would out of it, you kind of had to see it from his perspective and understand where he was coming from.
Gotcha.
And it's like, I'm not comfortable doing that when he's sitting there killing a bunch of American soldiers.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that maybe is like a personal thing.
Interesting.
That I wouldn't, not everybody would get that out of it. But I think that's I think the muddledness, especially, and I don't want to spoil this at all, but especially with the end, because I think the strongest line in giving a message, in giving a purpose to the story happens at the very end, and it's very clear that he's trying to say something
Yeah.
with that ending. Because there's like no music even through almost the entire. There's a little
Really?
bit of
Wow.
there's a little bit of an accompaniment at times. It's kind of like building tension and stuff. But there's a little bit at the very end, and it feels very purposeful that they're doing that on purpose to kind of give you a sense of like, this is the important message. Like, we're
Yeah.
going to give you music here, so you recognize like, hey, this is the important part. Pay attention to this.
Right.
So it just felt like they were kind of, like in a way, kind of like trying to say like, well, listen to what this guy's saying and believe what he's saying. And it's like, whether or not I agree or disagree with the Iraq War, I'm not going to get into that, whether or not I do or I don't. It just felt like I felt very uncomfortable with siding with a guy that's killing a bunch of American soldiers.
Interesting. I don't know if it's even directly related, because I recently watched Eye in the Sky. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's actually a really fantastic movie. Has to do with like the morality of drone strikes,
Yeah.
collateral damage, and those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that hesitation about not really being sure. Like, they want me to root for this person, but I don't know if I really should.
Yeah.
That movie was great until like the last like 1 minute where they have this credit and they're really manipulating you to feel a certain way.
Right. Yeah.
But it reminds me of that a little bit as
Yeah.
far as the message is concerned.
Well, I think that's what I was going to say. I don't know if I said it very effectively, but I feel like maybe the reason why it's not getting amazing ratings is because the message was pretty muddled.
Okay.
I think it was pretty unclear what exactly they were trying to accomplish with that message. And I will say this as well. There's certain films with certain American soldiers at times that do bad things and do horrible things.
Right.
And in a way, it's like you can understand why in the film's context, it's justified for these soldiers to maybe get killed or something like that. I get that. So I'm not like, just because they're American soldiers,
Right.
they don't deserve to die.
Right.
But this is a very real film. It takes place in a real story which is a real event that occurred, the Iraq War. They're real in a sense, real soldiers that are acting in a very honest and realistic fashion. And they haven't done anything on the basis of the script to sort of deserve getting killed. They're just doing their duty. They're doing their job as a soldier in the American military and the armed forces. So I'm not gonna side against them.
Right.
Maybe outside the country people will love it. Maybe in Iraq they're like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. It's great.
Were there any like white knuckle moments?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and that was another thing that I think they did a good job with. There was definitely some suspenseful moments. There was nothing scary.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing like but kind of like kind of moments where you're just like it's building suspense, like it's like tightening, and something's gonna probably happen there, but you don't know exactly what. So
cool. What would you rate this thing?
I would probably give this movie, I wish I had more time because it's hard.
Give it a tentative score. You can revisit it later.
I would give it a tentative score of a 79.
Really?
Yeah, 78, 79.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I still want to check it out, and so we can talk about it.
Last thing I'll say, if it weren't for Aaron Taylor Johnson, I would not have given it his highest score. He really does do it. In fact, I in a way, I was almost like I didn't even believe it was him because he's got like a mannerism of speaking at times and stuff like that. That's very much him. As a very and it didn't even feel like him. So
cool.
So
that's awesome.
Hopefully you get a chance to watch it.
Yeah,
and then we can maybe revisit just briefly and talk.
I'd like
about your
to.
thoughts.
I mean, it's a short movie.
Yeah, it's
it's 80 minutes.
Yeah,
so we can definitely try and hash that out, kind of like what we did with Life last month.
Yeah, sounds good.
But yeah, anyways, that's good to hear. I want to check out The Wall. Definitely was one of my one of the ones I wish I could have checked out this weekend, but. That's it. That's all we have for The Wall and for today's reviews.
There you go.
If you weren't listening earlier and you want to get connected with us and check out this, we're gonna we'll make sure it goes across all of our social media platforms, our website. But yeah, you can reach out to us at whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's at Real Review Media. That's spelled REEL. And then also on our website at realreviewmedia.com. And feel free to email us. Let us know what you thought about these movies. I'm really curious as to what you guys thought about King Arthur. If you saw it, which $14 million would suggest that not a ton of people saw it.
Yeah.
But was it deserving of a 26% on Rotten Tomatoes? I certainly don't think it was, but let me know what your thoughts were on that. And then, and is there anything else you want to add to that, Joel?
Nah, I think we're good.
Nah, well, anyways, it's been real.
It's been real.